Hello everyone, my name's Will Vincent and welcome to this, the first episode of my brand new podcast, Second Times Better. It's a look through music to identify those times when the second version of a track, you know what, is just a little bit better than the OG version. To give you a couple of examples, it could be via collaboration, such as when Bring Me the Horizon teamed up with Ed Sheeran, replacing that goddamn awful 8-bit style backing track with something, with proper instruments. Or it could be that time when Queen upped the ante with the culturally relevant song Hammer to Fall at Live Aid back in 1985, bringing a new tempo and sense of energy to the track. Could be that time that League of Legends went all in with their college marching band's reinterpretation of the legendary Silver Scrapes of the 2018 League of Legends College Championship. Or it could just be as simple as an artist or a band covering a song in a way that's just different. Placebo's version of Running Up That Hill, that song that everyone kind of got obsessed with because of that Stranger Things show that was on Netflix. Before we get going, a couple of quick notes. First of all, this will be a regular-ish series with new episodes every couple of weeks or so. There may be times when they're a little bit more frequent. There'll be times when there's a bit of a gap because you know what? Life happens. I've got other things that go on in my world and occasionally they have to take priority. But whenever possible, we're always going to make sure we've got a couple of episodes in the tank ready to go just in case we can't do something immediately. Secondly, these aren't going to be long. I'm not going to be Joe Rogan talking to you for 3 hours until you've, face planted your keyboard and I've just face planted my mixing desk. We're going to try and keep these down to 15 minutes maximum. These are supposed to be short, entertaining, a little bit insightful along the way as well. So we just want to make sure that you're not thinking that you're signing yourself up to listening to hours and hours of me rambling on. No, it's not going to be that. Short, to the point, job done. That brings me to my next point, which is that lovely thing called copyright strikes. I've already lost a YouTube channel this year. Still don't know the reason why. So I'm going to make sure that I don't get any more copyright strikes because I can't afford to fight any lawsuits and I can't afford to lose yet another YouTube channel. What I am going to do is put all of the links to what I'm talking about in the description for every single episode. So if you want to dive in further, listen to the OG track, listen to the remix or the remake or the whatever, it'll be there for you. And finally, you, my dear listeners, you are more than welcome to shame my work, to praise my work, and even give me some suggestions. You can find me on Blue Sky, you can find me on WhatsApp, or you can email me. Again, links in the description. And with that sorted, let's get into our first track, which is Run This Town by Jay-Z, Rihanna, and Kanye West. And for the remake, it involves a band called E.S Posthumus coming along for the ride. Now, if there was a specific song that made me decide to start a podcast based on cover versions, remixes and the like I've just done, this would be it. I was actually on a bus heading out on a Saturday afternoon to do some shopping when the original version of this song came up via my Apple Music suggested songs playlist. Now, I'm not generally someone that's going to be listening to a lot of Rihanna and Kanye West. Do listen to a bit of Jay-Z, particularly the work that he did with Linkin Park. But it turned up and I was like, how do I know this song? How do I know this song? And about 5 minutes later, it hit me because of the fact that it was used in one of the most beautiful Super Bowl intro packages put together by a TV network ever. Quick fun fact. If you were to combine the wealth of Jay-Z, Rihanna and Kanye West, you'd be looking at something of $5 billion plus. E.S Posthumus, on the other hand, they were just, two brothers working together to create music. And if you're a fan of American football, you definitely know a little bit of that work. Because Franz Vonlichten and Helmut Vonlichten, who made up the band E.S Posthumus, they're most well known for the intro music and what they play, just before commercial breaks and coming out of commercial breaks and when they do sponsor reads for the NFL on CBS. So if you've watched American football and you've watched the NFL on CBS, you have actually been listening to E.S Posthumus' work for years and years and years and years and years. And as well as doing the kind of instrumental package, the same way that Fox have had the same monotonous thing since 1994, and John Williams has basically been in charge of doing the NFL on NBC since they regained the rights back in 2006, they also had the opportunity to do a couple of what we call hard opens for Super Bowl packages. So the way the NFL and Super Bowl works is you've got your pre-game show, your pre-game show, maybe a chat with the president, then we're almost there show, and then kind of around the top of the hour, they'll show a video package, which is really the start of the quote-unquote main coverage of the Super Bowl. And at least twice, E.S Posthumus have done this. They did one 3 years later by completely knocking out of the park We Will Rock You by Queen. And they did this, Run This Town. So in terms of the actual track, I actually had a really good copy of it. It was on my old YouTube channel that, as I mentioned a moment ago, has actually, gone kaput. And despite what I say, Google are basically just saying computer says no. So that's it. I've lost what was a really good video that would have been really easy to put in the description for you to kind of have a look at. There are a couple of copies of the track, both in its video form and just the audio only version of the form, that do exist on YouTube. And if you go on Apple Music or Spotify, there is also a version of that as well. You just need to type in E.S Posthumus, Run This Town. It will come up eventually, quickly, depending on what, you use for your music. And it actually was released as a track in July of 2010. The Super Bowl, of course, taking place in February of 2010. So we've got to consider the original here, because not only is it amazing, it managed to reach number 2 in the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 in the UK Top 40. So we're not just talking about a track, that someone's picked out of nowhere and just completely magically, reimagined into something better. This was a superstar track in the first place. And let's again, just remind ourselves, $5 billion net worth between the 3 artists that were working on this together. But what makes this version of the track so special is the way that E.S Posthumus added their own sense of vibe to it. There was already piano in the original version. What E.S Posthumus did, they took that piano idea, they ran with it, and they made it more orchestral. They did exactly the same thing when it came to the strings. Remembering the fact that this is for the Super Bowl, which is one of the 2 most watched sporting events in the world in any given year alongside the UEFA Champions League final, you wanted something that stood out. CBS have always made it. I mean, you look through CBS's history, from the end of the Final Four, when they had the same track every year and the cutting down of the nets, to their golf coverage, to the NFL coverage. The way they do intros and outros is just fantastic. And they really, really nailed it in this edition. It was actually a game, by the way, between the New Orleans Saints, who were heading into their first ever Super Bowl, and the Indianapolis Colts. And we'll get onto the game in just a moment's time. But the way that the track uses the piano, uses the strings, and keeps the flow of the track going lyrically, but adds a little bit more of an oomph to it, is just amazing. It doesn't just smack you in the face for the sake of it, but the strings add some amazing transitions when you go from verse to chorus, and it creates a different, but yet still somehow similar feel to the track. And I think that the lyrics, they're more emphasized as a consequence of this, as I think that from a composer's point of view, they managed to figure out where they needed to add that additional oomph, and they just ran with it. One funny thing as well is that from a branding standpoint, E.S Posthumus were just incredible in the way that they were still able to get in that traditional NFL on CBS line. The dun, 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 dun. They do it twice. I mean, that's just a French kiss moment there. Absolutely spectacular. And, if you watch the NFL 17 weeks a year, then you watch the playoffs, then you watch the Super Bowl, you'll notice it. If you're someone that just turns up and go, oh, it's Super Bowl, do I need to go and get some brisket, get some wings, get some beans? You probably won't, but still, it flows as the track. And this is where, unfortunately, we have to talk a little bit about what happened next, because just a few months later, Franz Vonlichten passed away in the spring of 2010. So this was basically his last kind of like work with the NFL on CBS and the Super Bowl in particular. Franz's brother Helmut continues to write music, and he's in a band known as Les Friction. And this track, Run This Town, was actually also supposed to be used for CBS's coverage of Thursday Night Football when they got the rights to that in 2014. However, the first week that CBS had the rights to Thursday Night Football, there was a domestic abuse incident with Ray Weiss, and basically James Brown and the crew, they did a stripped-back version of the pre-game show. And that rather upset Rihanna, thinking, why is my music not being used? They had a little bit of a Twitter spat, and basically they just didn't use it. We don't know whether it's going to be the original version, whether it's going to be the E.S Posthumus remixed version, or something else entirely. We don't know. Rihanna did actually use the track in her Super Bowl halftime show for all of about 20 seconds, but that was on Fox, so, you know, you're not going to use the CBS crafted version on a Fox broadcast, are you? And to talk about the game itself, I mean, I'm a Hoosier of sorts, and I'm an Indianapolis Colts fan, so I'd like to forget about that game as much as possible, because, first of all, the first onside kick outside of the fourth quarter in Super Bowl history, when the Saints basically started the third quarter with an onside kick. They won the game 31-17, which will be the last time the Colts have made it to the Super Bowl, the last time Peyton Manning made the playoffs because he got injured the following year, and then we ended up having Andrew Luck taking us through to the playoffs, actually having the greatest comeback in playoff history when they played against the Kansas City Chiefs. And then we had Deflategate, and then Luck got injured and got injured again and injured again, then retired. And since then, the Colts have just basically sucked. Let's be honest. And that's about it. That is Run This Town by Jay-Z, Rihanna, Kanye West, and E.S Posthumus. Have a listen to it. If you know the original track, come to it with an open mind, because it is spectacular. If you've never heard the track before, listen to the original, then listen to the remake, because they are both exceptional. And that is all we've got time for this first episode. Don't forget, reach out to me, let me know what you think about Run This Town, both the original and the remade version. And if you've got any suggestions as to what you'd like me to cover next time, feel free to let me know. Until then, I'll talk to you next time. Ta-ra.